is more challenging than giving a speech? Giving an impromptu speech. Mark Twain said, "It usually takes more than 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech." What would he mean by that? Well, think about it. If you're going to be able to speak off the cuff about any topic, you really need to know that topic well. You have to have done your research and internalise everything about it in order to be able to speak extemporaneously about it. Every day we're called upon to give impromptu speeches, whether it be answering questions, speaking on the telephone, job interviews, chatting with your work colleagues, being in a meeting, social occasions. In this presentation, we are going to look at 2 issues related to impromptu speaking. The secret to impromptu speaking and some strategies to help you with impromptu speech. Let's begin with the secret to impromptu speaking. Listen, pause, confirm the question, reply, end. Think of the mnemonic LPCRE. Listening properly commands respect everywhere. Listen. When you listen, it's important to really focus on what is said, listening to the meaning, not just the words, and then use what was said as part of your response. If somebody asks you, "How are you going to go ahead with this?" then you might begin with, "I agree that it is difficult to plan ahead. However," that then gives you a chance to segue into what it is that you're going to say and have a chance to think about it too. Don't interject. If somebody is asking you a question, concentrate on what the person is saying. We already had that session about active listening. There are, of course, 3 advantages of careful listening. In the first place, it shows respect, and when you show respect, you gain respect. Secondly, it gives you a ready-made dialogue for your reply. And thirdly, it gives you a relevant response. You can then comment directly on what you have heard, and you've already got the words built in. The second mnemonic after listen was pause. We pause a few seconds just to help you organise your thoughts. And that pause can actually help to add drama to your response. And it shows that you're taking the question seriously. Silence, of course, is always preferable to filler words like you know, well. Just silence. Pause before you speak is a bit like look before you leap. It helps to avoid foot-in-mouth disease. The third part is to confirm the question. Again, when you check with the person who asked whether this was the question that you actually heard, it also gives you a chance to think again. And of course, it ensures that you have really understood the question and shows the speaker that you are empathetic. Then the next one is reply. Now that you have their attention, you reply. And in your reply, it is important to stay focused and relevant. Tell only the essentials. Just whet their appetite for more information. Never tell them everything. Always leave them wanting a little bit more. Don't tell them everything you know about the topic. I can give you an example of this. Some years ago, I managed to lose 22.5 kilos. Now, of course, my friends who hadn't seen me for a while all wanted to know how I did it. And I wouldn't tell them too much. Otherwise, I'd sound like an advertisement. There was a product I'd used. My son was selling it. And initially, I just took this to help him out, not expecting to have much difference or that it would have much effect for me. But it did, and that was great. But when my friends asked me about it, I just gave them a little bit of information. Oh, I've just taken something that my son was marketing. And if they didn't ask any more, I didn't say any more. But if they said, well, tell us, what is this? Then I'd tell them a little bit more about it. Always leave them wanting more. Don't tell them everything. And then finally, end. Once you've answered succinctly, stop talking. You might emphasise your main point, smile, maintain eye contact, and then sit down. The second issue I said we would talk about is strategies that you can use for impromptu speaking. One of the best ways of preparing for impromptu speaking, of course, is just to keep up with the times. Know what current events are all about. Then you're knowledgeable. Make sure your general knowledge is up to everybody else's as well. In addition to that, here are some further strategies that you can use to respond effectively. And you can find them all listed in Module 4 under the section Always Have Your Speech Ready. The first one is the report plan. This is where you break your answer into these components: who, what, where, when, why, and how. And you tell a little bit about each one. For example, if I was to talk about Toastmasters International, who? Ralph C. Smedley was the man who began Toastmasters International. What? Toastmasters is a communication and leadership development program. Where? It began in the YMCA basement in California. And now it is an organisation that's all over the world. When? It began in 1924. Why? Well, Mr. Smedley noticed that young men needed training in the art of public speaking and presiding over meetings, and he decided he'd do something about it. And how? Toastmasters is done by practicing public speaking and leadership skills in a supportive, informal atmosphere of clubs all over the world. That's the report plan. Another strategy you might use is what we call the opinion plan, or PREP, P-R-E-P, where you state an opinion and then justify it with a supporting statement. One if answering a question, or 2 or 3 supporting statements if you're making a brief speech. And the PREP is, you make a point, you give a reason, then you give an example of that reason and restate the point. For example, I might make the point that the Great Barrier Reef is a national treasure. Why is it a national treasure? The reason is because it is home to countless species and our whole ecostructure depends on it. For example, the coral has taken centuries to grow and it is the basis for the ecosystem. And then I restate the point. We must take action to protect our Great Barrier Reef. A third strategy is addressing cause and effect, where you state the situation, list the causes and the effect. For example, the situation of lung cancer. Lung cancer is a serious health issue. First and second-hand smoke exposure are some causes of lung cancer, and the effect has to do with hospitalisation and the enormous cost, both in money and socially, that it has on our society, not to mention death. The final strategy is to discuss the past, present and future. This might be particularly if a personal response is needed. For example, when I was nearly 3, my family migrated from the Netherlands to Australia. Now, I have moved from Sydney, where we first lived, and I'm living in regional Victoria and some of the time in Melbourne because I now work there. My children, all 6 of them, I have raised and hope that they will make a positive contribution to this country in the future. It might take you 3 weeks, like Mark Twain, to memorise these strategies. But finally, whatever you do, don't apologise if you're asked to speak impromptu. It's just a waste of time, and it's downright annoying to the audience if you apologise. You're given a question, you want to think on your feet, and using these strategies, you should be able to get some good words out there. Don't ramble. Wrap up once you've finished saying what you have to say by perhaps restating your strategic points briefly, whether it is who, what, when, where, why and how, or the prep, the point, the reason, the example and the point, or your cause and effect, or past, present and future. Don't invent. Be sincere. Don't make it up. Have a look in Module 4 and read what happened with Bush in the White House press release, and you'll see what I mean. If you don't know, then admit that you don't know honestly and show your interest by perhaps asking some questions of your own or referring the question that you can't answer to the rest of the audience. You'll see how keen they'll be to help you there. I was once giving a speech to do with music, and somebody in the audience asked me, how much do the music books cost? And I honestly didn't know. I hadn't found out. So I told them, good question. I don't know. I'll find out for you and I'll let you know. Remember my student Katrina? The one who started off so nervously that she couldn't say her own name and finished off as one of the best speakers in the student seminars? Well, Katrina also got back to me about the value of learning to speak impromptu in this course. And these are her words. Participating in the impromptu speaking exercise on the first day was difficult and uncomfortable, and I didn't believe I could possibly improve this skill in 6 weeks. I hoped then that this course would enable me to. The confidence I have gained to be able not only to do this, but to do it well, has surprisingly increased considerably. You may not always have time to prepare a speech, but by practicing impromptu speaking, you can train yourself to become a prepared speaker. And then, like Mark Twain, you will always have your speech ready. There will be a session on the UCU to rehearse our impromptu speaking skills. And when evaluating each student, each of your peers, consider these 3 things: their body language, their vocal variety, and their speech construction. I'm looking forward to participating with you in some good impromptu speaking sessions.